Welcome to Good Vibes, the podcast that brings the timeless beauty of Eishes Chayil into the rhythm of real life. Each week, we unpack one pasuk, not as a shir, but as a spark for honest conversations, refreshing insights, and a little Torah light you can carry with you. Because meaning shouldn't feel heavy, and connection doesn't have to wait for quiet. This is Good Vibes, for the Jewish woman who's doing a lot and still reaching deeper. Hi, everyone, and welcome to our first official episode of the Good Vibes podcast. Last time, in our intro episode, I shared how this podcast came to be. I was very eager to really know what it is to be an Eishes Chayil after seminary. I wanted to see what the Pesukim taught us, so I started looking into it and gaining really practical and eye-opening lessons. Every episode, we will have a guest to share with us their insights and practical tools regarding the topic at hand. We will hear from our audience, and we hope we can answer their questions as well. So today we're going to be discussing Aleph. So the pasuk is Eishes Chayil mi yimtza v'rachuk mipnei michra, which literally translates to who can find a woman of valor. She is more precious than pearls. We know this pasuk. We even might call this pasuk famous. It's something that we say every week on Friday night on Shabbos. But when I first read this and when I was first looking into it, my biggest question was, what is an Eishes Chayil? Which we hope, and Emir Tzashem, throughout this podcast, we're going to learn the in-depth details of that in the future episodes. But what is the overarching definition of an Eishes Chayil? What is this Chayil that we're striving to be? So today we have Mrs. Schoomaker. She is a teacher and a lecturer here in Eretz Yisrael, and she is a longtime teacher in Mechlala, and she gives women vadim around Jerusalem as well. Thank you so much, Mrs. Schoomaker, for being here.
My pleasure. Such an honor to be here. An honor to approach the first pasuk.
Baruch Hashem. Mrs. Schoomaker was really, really foundational with making this podcast happen. So it is just very apropos that she is here on our first pasuk. So thank you again, Mrs. Schoomaker. I guess maybe we can start off with, what do you think about when you hear the words Eishes Chayil? What is kind of like the summary of an Eishes Chayil, or the definition, the go-to phrase that you think of when you think of Eishes Chayil?
Okay. I have a very specific way of looking at it, and it's my own individual interpretation. But when I think of the concept of Chayil, I think of like the strength that comes with being a soldier. And I think that a woman who is really like that pillar of strength, fighting for the security and the happiness of her home. And that's what comes to mind.
That's so interesting. So practically, how do you think that kind of pans out? Practically, how do we see that kind of play out in real life? How is that something that we can strive to?
So let's look at a little bit of context, is that in the Torah, when Hashem puts Adam and Chava in Gan Eden, the Torah tells us la'avda v'l'shamra. And some of the Mefarshim say that la'avda is the man and l'shamra is the woman. So she's the protector. She's the guarder of her home. So she is guarding this home with this protective nature. And that is part of her strength, is really being vigilant and being aware of what's going on in her home, both emotionally, spiritually, even physically. This is a very big, important point. The Gemara in Yevamos also backs this up by saying, Shoi below Isha, Shoi below Choma, that a man without a wife does not have a protective wall. And the Choma is the woman. So she is this like strong, protective person who is really taking responsibility for a lot of things in her home. I want to just comment that the Gemara in Yevamos that says "Shoi b'lo isha, shoi b'lo choma," without a protective wall, there are two words in Lashon HaKodesh for a wall. There is a kir and there's a choma. Kir shares the same shoresh as kor, which means cold, and choma shares the shoresh of home, which is warmth. So this protective wall is a wall of warmth. And I'll give a very practical example that when a woman wants to make her home the place to be, she could either use the core method, which is you don't want to go out there. The world there is dangerous and all kinds of temptations. Stay home. Or she could say, this is the place to be. This is the place of warmth. And here is where all your needs are provided for. Here's where you're understood. This is the place where we want to be. And I think it's not for naught that Chazal used the Russian of Homa, because she's vigilant, she's protective, but she uses her feminine warmth to create that protection for her family.
That's so beautiful. When you said that, when you said home and car, something that I heard a while back was that, when it's freezing and you're, let's say, shopping on the streets, and every time you go into a store, you're like so excited to go into the heat and your hands are almost falling off and you're so excited to like just be in front of a heater. And that feeling of when you are so cold coming into a place, that is what our homes should represent, and that is what we should strive our homes to be. We wanna be the place where our kids and our husbands want to come in so desperately out of the "cold," quote, unquote, of the world and come back into our home, and I think that that's, like, very apropos, and it's actually in the pasuk where it says "pninim." It's so interesting that the pasuk chooses that specific comparison to a pearl. Like, I think almost all of us would agree rather diamonds than pearls, at least today.
Mhm.
So, why does the pasuk compare to a pearl? So, I learned that the way that the pearl is actually made is that it's shut in a clam all the way down deep in the bottom of the ocean, and that the clam's job, what happens is that the clam has to make sure that no deterrent, nothing comes inside. It's clammed shut, literally, and it has all these mechanisms to make sure that nothing comes inside. And if something comes inside, so then the pearl is ruined. And the clam's job is to keep closed so that we can make sure that this pearl is able to develop and actually be like the most beautiful pearl. And that is exactly what our role is. That is exactly what our job is. And again, in Ritz Hashem, we're going to define more of that as the psukim go on, as the episodes go on. But our overarching role, I guess, like a summary that I think of is be this pearl, be this clam to create this pearl of creating a choma, creating a boundary, being strong like a chayil to make sure that nothing comes in and be able to produce this pearl of yourself, of your home, of your family, of Klal Yisrael, that you're part in Klal Yisrael. And so interesting, Mrs. Schoomaker, that you mentioned both a chayil and a choma because it both of those to me reflect strength, and both of those reflect having to. I think we sometimes assume that an Eishes Chayil is simply edel, which we strive for edelkeit. I think that's amazing. But we also simultaneously have this strength, and being able to have this strength of standing up straight and having a choma and being a chayil of serving Hashem and keeping the clam shut, quote unquote, to create the pearl of our home. Doing that and doing it gracefully, I feel like is what we're aiming for, what our goal is.
Beautiful. Exactly. Exactly.
So, what would you say to a girl who might feel like this is so not up her alley? Maybe she just got engaged and she feels like this is going to come so not naturally to her. What advice do you have, or how would you recommend her to approach this?
So I'm going to say that part of what happens, let's say for the girl who gets engaged who's getting married, is that part of the Homa and part of the Eishes Chayil is moving from one-way thinking to three-way thinking. One-way thinking is what's good for me. And when the person transitions into marriage, that transitions into three-way thinking, which is what's good for me, what's good for him, and what's good for the marriage. Now, the marriage doesn't have a voice of its own. Somebody has to advocate for the marriage and speak up for the marriage. And here, part of being that strong Ishes Chayil is that we really can think about things in a much wider way than just what's good for me. I'll give an example. There's a concept called a marital collusion. And a marital collusion is when you do something that's good for you and it's good for him, but it's not necessarily good for the marriage. So I'll give a very simple example, which is that if I like to vacation in a certain location and he likes to vacation in another location, well, I can go to my location, he can go to his. Good for him, good for me, not good for the marriage. And there are many, many marital collusions, which is why we turn from one-way thinking to three-way thinking, not two-way thinking. Because sometimes there's something called the super parent collusion, which is okay, I'm going to invest all my efforts into the children, and you're going to like understand that I don't have time for you because I'm busy with the kids. And you're going to do the same thing. And we'll meet up in 25 years when everybody's like grown up. But that's a collusion which is not good for the marriage. And therefore, the Ashes Chayil, she's really strong. She's able to think about her own needs, which is a very important piece in this whole story, but also his needs and the marriage needs. And she uses her Bina Yisera to really look at something from a much wider perspective. And that's what makes her so strong.
That's so interesting. I think that often, I like that you brought in this idea of that the marriage needs a spokesperson, because I think that often we think, okay, yeah, I need to think about my needs, I need to think about his needs, and Mirk Hashem, down the line, I need to think about the children's needs. But like you said, if we just think about our needs, just think about his needs, and even just think about the children's needs, if we don't put our marriage in the forefront, then we're not setting ourselves up for success. Like you said, putting our marriage's voice, having a spokesperson for the marriage itself is so crucial for the development of the marriage, for the marriage to start off in one place when you got married, and every year, every 5 years, every day is a progress, but to eventually be able to look back and say, my marriage is at a place where I wanted, I was able to be the Eishes Chayil that I was striving to be. Another thing that I always think about this for myself is, we know that it says Bilvavi Mishkan Evna, right? That inside of us, there's a Mishkan, we know that we were created with a chelik, Elokai Mimal, and within me as an individual, I can be a Mishkan, I can be a form of a Beis Hamikdash. And we know that between husband and wife and a home in and of itself is also a Mikdash Ma'at. And then there's the Mirtashem, the real Beis Hamikdash that we want to help partake, bring in this world. And what I find is that there's so many times where an Eishes Chayil's role will fall into one of these three categories of a Bate Mikdashim, either working on my own self and creating a place within myself that can be a Mikdash Ma'at, creating a Mikdash Ma'at in my home and being part of the community and the bigger picture at large to be able to bring the Beis HaMikdash.
Beautiful.
Mrs. Schoomaker, do you have anything to add to share with us about what a woman's role is, why Hashem put us in this world, and how that ties in with being an Eishes Chayil?
So I think that there is a lot to say about the woman's role in the marriage itself. And I think that when we look, the Maharal says that if you look at where the woman was created from, she was created from an inner organ of Adam. That's where Chava was created from. And it teaches us that she is the master of inner realities, which means that she sometimes reads between the lines and picks up things that the man might be very, very intelligent. He may have a very high IQ, but she was gifted with Bina Yisera. And Bina Yisera is lavin davar mitoch davar, to understand the things that are not being said. And this is a very, very big point of what she offers to the family. I always bring this funny example. It's not so funny, but you could have a child who's complaining every morning of stomach aches. And the husband may say, I think we should take the child to a gastro specialist. And the wife might say, I wonder if someone's bullying him in school. Now, he didn't say anything about bullying, but she's reading between the lines. It always comes up in the morning. The stomach is a place that often holds anxiety, and she's wondering what's not being said. And there is where she is the master of inner realities, and she offers that to the marriage. When the Torah tells us, "Lo tov hiyos adam levado aselo ezer kenegdo," the cynics might say, "Man had no one to iron his shirts and make him good chocolate chip cookies, so he needed a wife." But our answer to that is that this pasuk was said when Adam and Chava were in Gan Eden, and there was no food being cooked. There was no clothing that needed to be washed or ironed. There was no washing of the floor. There was no physical responsibilities in Gan Eden. And in that context, she was created as an Ezer Kenegdo, which means that whatever she's offering to the relationship has a lot to do with her intellect, her emotional world. She's supporting him in ways that are much greater. Her support, her major Ezer Kenegdo, is way beyond the physical needs. The physical needs are part of what creates the home and the warmth and the protection, that our needs are met on the physical level too. But what she's really offering is a lot of her intuition, her emotional understanding of things. And that's where she really contributes a lot to the relationship. So this is something very, very important to keep in mind, that the Ezer Kenegdo is, I once read that it's two very skilled people. When you say Ezer Kenegdo and the word help, on one level, people thank their cleaning lady for the help. On the other level, you thank the very, very specialized cardiologist for his help. So is she on top of him with the help? Is she below him with the help? And the pasuk is telling you, Ezer Kenegdo, facing him. It's like two highly skilled people who work together. like the pilot and the navigator, or the surgeon and the anesthesiologist. They both are very, very, very skilled in their area, and they work together as like a tag team. And that's really the Eishes Chayil. She's very powerful, and she contributes tremendously to the relationship with her strengths.
That's beautiful. I think that it's so telling that Hashem decided to create Chava in Gan Eden, in a place, like you said, that there was no physical needs. There was nothing that needed to be done. But obviously, Adam still needed Chava for the deeper reasons, and Adam still needed an Ezer Kenegdo to be there with him. What would you say? I think that a lot of times we think, why were we created? We were created to serve Hashem. But as an Isha, as a female and not a male, what is my tafkid? What is my number one role? Is it to raise children? Is it to be a wife? Is it to just generally bring the Shekhinah closer into our lives?
I think the answer is all of those things. That when I bring the best me to the table, I am also the best wife and the best mother. And our role as women has a lot to do with the vicarious accomplishments, meaning that when I create the right atmosphere and my husband can maximize his potential and my children can maximize their potential. So that's a lot of my definition. But that doesn't negate my own personal avodas Hashem. It just means that there are stages in life where sometimes we look and say, oh, I haven't been davening so much recently. I haven't been learning so much recently. I'm so busy cleaning for Pesach. I forgot what Pesach is really all about. And I'm so busy making food for Rosh Hashanah that I don't even have time for tshuva. And the answer is that a lot of our strength is through what we facilitate. And, of course, our own personal avodas Hashem is very, very important. And it makes us that rich person with a rich inner world of avodas Hashem. But at times when you feel like, oh, what am I accomplishing anyway? We have to remember that when we create the beautiful environment for people to flourish, the schus goes back to us for their accomplishments as well.
That's so nice. And I think that like what you're saying about, that when we show up as our best selves, individual, wife, mother, then it's kind of like this package deal. And going back to the beginning when you were saying that a chayil comes from the lesson of chayal, from the lesson of strength, choma, putting up that boundary of warmth and the strength of a chayal, of a soldier. I feel like it's after, having this conversation with you, I feel like it's hinting towards being this chayal over yourself and you as an individual within your home for your spouse and within your home for your children and within the larger community. And it kind of goes back to the three different levels of the Batei Mikdashim that I was talking about, and really taking it upon ourselves to being an Eishes Chayil is not just being there for our husbands whenever we need it. It's so much broader than that, and it's showing up as our best selves for whatever may come our way.
Completely. I want to also share with you that when I think of like the whole concept of being a soldier, I think about a lot of what it is really living for a bigger cause. And, I think now we have a war going on. And I hear from women who tell me about their sons who like sleep in their boots and wear the same socks like for days and days. And the mother will tell me, this is a son who used to shower every day and was an istinus and was makpid on everything. But he is living for this bigger cause, and he's sometimes giving up on his personal comfort for the sake of something bigger, but he doesn't feel taken advantage of. He doesn't feel resentful. He feels like, yeah, I'm committed to the cause. And part of the strength is that stretching. And I feel that we as women do the same, whether it's that you're tired and a baby's crying and you get out of bed, or sometimes in an argument, the ability to just be the bigger person or to forgive somebody for making a mistake. All this is sacrificing sometimes our personal comfort for a much bigger picture, and not in this resentful, I'm a doormat type of way, but more like I have a big picture and I'm that chayal who could just be the bigger person. And that resilience and the perseverance that comes with being a soldier, that's really what the Eishes Chayil is to me. It's somebody who has a bigger picture and she's strong. And part of her strength is her ability to tolerate discomfort, sometimes physical, sometimes emotional, in exchange for the bigger cause. And she's proud of herself.
What is our bigger picture? I know that every couple, every individual is going to have their own bigger picture, but speaking to the masses, what is the bigger picture of an Eishes Chayil? The same way that the Chayal has a bigger picture of why, they're fighting this war and why they're part of Klal Yisrael for, fighting for Klal Yisrael. What is an Eishes Chayil's bigger picture?
So there's a Gemara in Sanhedrin where from we learn this actually from the negative. It's actually a sad Chazal, and Chazal say, Amar Rav Alexander, Kol ish shemeta ishto biyamav, olam chashach ba'ado. Person who loses his wife during his lifetime, the world got dark for him. And then it goes on to say, Psiotav mitkatzrot, which means that his steps get smaller, Va'atzaton yiv'ara, and his good Eitzah kind of is destroyed. So we learn from this chazal, from the negative, what he lost, we learned what the wife actually did provide. Ado, the world got dark for him. We learn from here that the Eishes Chayil provides light for her home. And I once heard a very beautiful interpretation from the Sefer Al Racha that says like this: what does it mean, Olam Chashach Bado? He goes out to the outside world after he sits Shiva, and the sun is shining. It's not a dark world. But there's two types of light in this world. There's the light of the sun, and there's the light of a candle. The light of the sun represents the universal sun, which doesn't shine on one person more than the other. And in that sense, he's still part of a light world. People say, oh, he's a nice guy, he's a good guy. But what he lost was somebody who used to shine a candle on him and know his specific strengths and like make him shine. She would like know things about him that the world didn't know. So even though the universal light is still there, the individual light is not there anymore. And what the Eishes Chayil does is she builds up the self-esteem and the awareness of her loved ones, knowing their strengths and feeling proud of what they have to provide to the world. And therefore, she's spreading a special light on them. When we say psiotav mitkatzrot, that his steps got shorter after his wife died, he used to walk confidently with big strides, and now he's walking not as confidently. And because she understood him and, encouraged him and gently led him even in a very sensitive, feminine way, he was confident. He was able to like know his mission in the world. And Atzaton Ivara, the Gemara says, he used to get such good advice from her. And he doesn't have that anymore. So these are the different things that the Eishes Chayil is offering her home.
That's so interesting. I think that from what you've told us today, the way that now I look at what an Eishes Chayil is, I first of all, I look at this pasuk almost like Eishes Chayil miyimtza v'rachuk mipninim michra, and then like a semicolon, and that the psukim after this pasuk are going to teach us so much more about the makeup of an Eishes Chayil and what it is that an Eishes Chayil practically, the tools and the tasks and the perspectives and the midos that an Eishes Chayil holds. But this pasuk taught us what the overarching theme of what an Eishes Chayil is. An Eishes Chayil is a chayal, a soldier, one who builds a choma, a wall of warmth around her home, who is a clam creating pearls, who is somebody who does not let what is not wanted in her home, in her Daled Amos, within herself, her husband, her family, her home. And like you said, somebody who is a light onto their home and a light onto themselves to be their best selves, on a light onto their husbands to encourage their husbands, a light onto their home, and a light onto their community.
Beautiful. Beautiful. So well said. So well summarized. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mrs. Schoomaker, for joining us and being part of this inaugural episode. Please reach out and email us with any questions or thoughts. We would love to hear from you. Thanks for joining us and stay tuned for some more good vibes.